Hello, thank you for joining me. So in this video I'd like to show you how to put together a simple residential receptacle outlet, a receptacle cover or an outlet cover that you would find in a home. And what we're going to be doing with this video is kind of showing you some of the basic modeling functions I'm going to be going through, all the way from sketch elements up to certain features in order to put together a fairly robust and realistic model. And the desire with this thing is to show you how quickly some of these things come together, and also slow down a little bit and show you some of the steps along the way. So let's do this. Let's open up one of our template files, and we want to make sure you get into the right folder for that. So it is under templates. I'm going to open up part ANSI as we have, and then when you do that, your template file, you want to make sure you go ahead and resave that. So let's go to Save As, and go to my flash drive, go to Class, and under Week 2, I'm going to call that Outlets. And we're going to go to Save. We're about ready to get started. One thing you want to give a little bit of thought when you're putting something like this together is the ultimate orientation of your part. In regard to the receptacle or the outlet cover, its normal orientation would normally be on what we would consider to be the front plane. So we're going to go ahead and click on that, and we're going to start our sketch. So the first thing you do is you click on the plane, go up here to the Sketch tab on the Command Manager. If it isn't selected, if it isn't available up here, you can do the pull down, but go to the rectangle command and pull that down and select the center rectangle. And when you do that, it's automatically going to show you the origin, and it's going to reorient your view so that it's normal to the screen. And normally you would do something like that where you'd start with the origin, click right on the origin and swing that out, but it's something I want to show you with drawing a center rectangle. I went ahead and did a Control-Z. Control-Z undoes the last move. Control-Y will redo it if you want to do that. So if I did the Control-Y, it'll come right back. So we're going to do the Control-Z. Sometimes Control-Y doesn't always work. But just to show you how a center rectangle works, what you have here, and we've demonstrated this before with some sketch elements in here. These sketch relationships here, if you click on those, it'll show you in pink, in a pink line, changes that line to pink, what is being referenced by the sketch relations. This is a horizontal sketch relation, so it refers to that line being horizontal. It can't go in any other direction. If you delete that relationship, you have the ability to actually stretch that a little bit. All the other lines maintain their proper orientation, these two being vertical, this one being horizontal, while this one is now skewed. You can take that and reestablish that relationship by doing this short mouse menu up here. Make that horizontal. So I also want to show you too are these two coincident relationships. What you have going on here is a single point down here and two diagonal lines. This point is going to be coincident to both of those diagonal lines. You could also establish a midpoint relationship here, but by doing it this way, you still maintain the same position. That point is always going to be in the very center of that rectangle. So if you click on this coincident relationship, you can see that it's this diagonal line and that point. If you click on that coincident relationship, it is this point and that line. Now if we take that point and drag it over here to the origin, it achieves the same thing we were trying to do from the very beginning. It'll automatically establish a relationship there at the origin, and you can draw your rectangle out. But one thing to notice before I drop this into place is that you have a sketch relation, and instead of being green, it is now yellow. Yellow implies that it's about ready to be applied. So that's something to keep in mind. Green is already established. Yellow is going to be applied. So as soon as we drop it in there, that yellow one turns green. And we have the two other ones that we saw before, and now this one you'll see. You can't really see the origin lighting up, but you do see that point, which is pink, and that lights up too. So kind of belabored that a little bit, but if you're not really aware of these things, this is a really good way to demonstrate how this stuff works, because the more you understand it, the easier it's going to be for you to model and the faster you're going to be at it. So let's put some dimensions on this. Our height dimension, in front of my cheat sheet, it's going to be 4.5 inches. Width, it's going to be 2.75. Now you know this is just about ready to turn black, because we're going to put a dimension in here. It's black because everything's constrained now. Before we had the ability to move this around. Now let's do Control-Z a couple times. We have the ability to move this around. We can actually flip it on itself, and it's got all sorts of freedom. It can't move off that origin, so it's got some constraints in here, but as soon as we put these dimensions in here, it becomes better defined. And now it's fully defined. So now if you take any of these endpoints, it can't move. Okay, that's that. Now we're going to put in the holes where the receptacle or the outlet's going to come through. So let's start with a circle. You notice that we had a dotted line, which is going to try to establish a relationship with the center there, with the origin. Well, we're going to solidify that relationship, and we get our mouse shortcut menu. We're going to make that vertical. So now the circle does have some freedoms. It can move up and down, but it can't really move beyond that vertical position. I'm going to put a couple lines in here from one edge of the circle to the other. I'm going to be careful not to establish a relationship with these lines, but as soon as I got that in there, I'm going to make that horizontal. I'll probably move that up a little bit. We're going to do the same thing on the top too. We're going to make these two lines equal to each other. So now if we put a dimension on one of those lines, it will apply to both of them. Let's go ahead and put a diameter dimension on this too while we're at it. And it should be 1.3125, 1 5/16. Now if you have a dimension like this, which is sort of suggesting that there might be another digit back here that's doing some rounding on it, let's go ahead and click in that dimension and change its precision to one more unit after the decimal. So now it's going to read 1.3125. Let's go ahead and put a dimension on one of these lines. And that dimension is going to be 75.75, 3/4 of an inch. And one more dimension, and we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to establish some sketch geometry in here beyond what is already in here. We're going to put in a center line. And if we haven't talked about these lines before, the center line that I just put in is the same as this and that. These lines are used strictly for, and this is a test question, these lines are used strictly for establishing geometry. SolidWorks ignores it when it comes to do some sort of solid feature, whether it be an extrude or a hole. It's going to ignore these lines. So let's go ahead and do this line one more time, and let me show you a little bit closer what I'm doing. So a line, SolidWorks is going to do something solid with it. A center line, it's going to ignore that. We're just going to use it for geometry. So as we approach this line, it turns orange, which means we're going to select it. And you'll notice by the cursor we have the little pencil and a line symbol on that with the midpoint relationship about ready to be established because it's yellow. We're going to click in the midpoint of that line and drag it over here to the midpoint of this line. And that line, which would normally be blue if we didn't do any sort of additional constraints on it, if we just drew a line out like that, actually becomes black. It becomes black because it's referencing something that's already fully defined on this side, fully defined on that side, constrained within those 2 points. It too becomes fully defined. So let's go ahead and click on our circle, click on that line, and here's something else to keep in mind. We're going to put a distance between those two lines of 1.625, 1 5/8 of an inch. Now right now it says 1.0 and 1.034 and probably some change after that, where we're going to go ahead and redefine that dimension once we get it planted. If we take that dimension, now if you'll notice this, if we're on this side of the center line, the dimension is kind of like a radius dimension in a way, but if you put it on the other side, it suddenly gets twice as big. And that's by design, and it will become more apparent as we do some revolve features. But since we want to really establish not necessarily to the center line, but maybe to the outlet, which is going to be a mirror image on the bottom, we're going to go ahead and stretch that and put that on the other side. And then here we're going to type in 1.625. That brings that down a little bit. Let me do a couple more things to probably terminate this video, and then we'll pick it up in the next one. Let me show you the Trim Entities button. Also up here in the Sketch tab of the Command Manager. Let's go ahead and trim out the top. And the neat thing about this is it allows you, if you can see the swirls I'm making here, anything that penetrates, any element that you have as a sketch entity in your drawing will disappear because of it. So as soon as I take that cursor and cross that line, gets rid of that line. Let's try that again, Trim Entities. What we want to do is we want to come up here and trim this half and that half. Now, of course, this one, because it's being constrained by these two center lines, we're going to have to take that extra step and trim between the center lines and the rest of that arc that we're trying to trim out. So there we have it. We have half of this. We're going to finish sketching this in the next film, and then we're going to put some bells and whistles on film number 3.